$38.7 million, 187 separate wire transfers, a full decade of deception. And somehow, no one saw a thing. Her name was Elizabeth Gutfar, and she was the publicly elected treasurer for Santa Cruz County, Arizona. The people of her community had placed their trust in her, handing her control of every single tax dollar that passed through their hands. The lifeblood of the county property taxes, school budgets, the funding for the fire department, all of it was channeled directly through her office. And for 10 straight years, she was systematically siphoning it all away, diverting it into her own accounts. In a stunning admission, her own defense attorney would later describe it as one of the most brazen, yet unsophisticated, crimes in the history of Arizona. The question is chilling. How could one woman pilfer nearly $40 million from a county of just 48,000 residents and remain a ghost for an entire decade? That is the question we are here to unravel. Santa Cruz County lies pressed against the international border between Arizona and Mexico. It's the state's smallest county by landmass, with its government seat in Nogales, a city mere footsteps from the Mexican line. This is not a place of wealth. The median income for a family here lingers around $53,000 a year. For more than 1 in 5 residents, life is a daily struggle below the poverty line. Almost a quarter of the county's children are raised in poverty. Local schools are in desperate need of repairs that the budget simply cannot cover. In a region susceptible to devastating wildfires, the Rio Rico Fire District is forced to rely on a fleet of aging brush trucks. It was into this financially strained community that Elizabeth Gutfar made her entrance. She first assumed the office of county treasurer in 2012. This wasn't an appointment, it was a position bestowed by the public. The voters selected her, and they continued to do so, re-electing her year after year, right up until 2024. Consider the gravity of that title, county treasurer. She was the designated guardian of every dollar belonging to the community. But a detail revealed by her own defense attorney is profoundly unsettling. Gutfar possessed no formal education or training in finance whatsoever. In official court filings, he argued that she was fundamentally unqualified for the role of treasurer from the very beginning. His description painted a picture of a woman with virtually no business acumen or financial training, who was nevertheless elected to manage the entire county's treasury. The people of Santa Cruz County put their faith in the office itself. No one thought to scrutinize the individual who held it, and it was precisely that blind trust she would go on to exploit. The scheme began in 2014. That's when Gutfar started initiating wire transfers, moving public money out of the official Santa Cruz County bank account. But the destination wasn't another government agency. The money was being funneled into accounts controlled by companies that she, herself, had secretly established. These were classic shell corporations, empty businesses that conducted no actual commerce. Their sole purpose was to act as a repository for stolen public funds. From there, she would transfer the money again, this time into her personal accounts at Wells Fargo and the Bank of Montreal. But the mechanics of the crime reveal a staggering level of audacity. The county's system for wire transfers was designed with a 2-person approval protocol. One employee would initiate a transfer, and a second, separate employee was required to authorize it. It was a fundamental security measure put in place specifically to prevent this very type of internal theft. Gutfar circumvented it completely. She managed this by stealing the digital access token belonging to one of her subordinates. This gave her the power to both propose and then approve her own fraudulent transfers. In effect, she became a committee of one, the only person required to sign off on her own theft. Across a span of 10 years, she executed 187 illicit transfers, bleeding $38.7 million from the county's coffers. To conceal the massive hole in the budget, she doctored accounting ledgers, forged cash reconciliation statements, and falsified reports on the county's investment portfolio, and on top of it all, she failed to report a single cent of the stolen money on her federal income taxes, illegally evading a tax burden of more than $13 million. So what became of the nearly $40 million she stole from one of the most impoverished communities in Arizona? The money went towards at least 20 different vehicles. It paid for multiple properties, including real estate in Pinetop, Arizona, and south of the border in Mexico. She poured money into renovating a sprawling family ranch, which court documents would later describe as a vast property featuring a luxurious home. She financed a cattle business and a horse ranch. She used the public's money to pay for her son's wedding gift and even hosted her daughter's wedding on the lavish, renovated ranch. It funded a lifestyle of luxury clothing and frequent travel to Mexico. The contrast is stark, and it demands to be considered. On one side, a county where children attend crumbling schools and firefighters operate with outdated equipment. On the other, the county treasurer building a personal empire on the back of their tax dollars. So after a decade of plunder, how did the entire scheme finally come crashing down? After 10 years and 187 transfers, the discovery didn't come from an internal audit. It wasn't exposed by a whistleblower. The red flag was raised by a bank. In April of 2024, Chase Bank identified and flagged 11 suspicious transactions connected to Santa Cruz County accounts. The bank then notified the county. County officials acted swiftly, immediately revoking Gutfar's access to all financial systems. A joint federal investigation was launched, spearheaded by the FBI and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. On April 12, 2024, Elizabeth Gutfar submitted her resignation. After 12 years in a position of public trust, her time was up. A county supervisor by the name of Rudy Malera, a man who had considered Gutfar a friend for 50 years, would later state at her sentencing that her deception was cloaked in familiarity. She was your friend, your colleague. The betrayal, he implied, was personal and profound. In November of 2024, Gutfar stood before a judge in a Tucson federal courtroom. There, she pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts: embezzlement by a public official, money laundering, and tax evasion. In a plea agreement, both her defense team and the prosecution agreed to recommend a sentence of no more than 6.5 years. The presiding judge, however, saw things differently. On June 23, 2025, United States District Judge Rosemary Marquez invoked aggravating factors, handing Gutfar a sentence of 10 years in federal prison. That's 120 months, followed by 3 years of supervised release and a restitution order for roughly $51.8 million owed to Santa Cruz County and the U.S. Treasury. Judge Marquez fixed her gaze on Gutfar and spoke directly to her. Every day, I sentence people who come to this country fighting for their very lives, struggling to feed their families. That is not your story. You are a citizen of the United States. You were employed. There is no justification here. Gutfar offered an apology to the residents of Santa Cruz County. The prosecution was unsparing. This was not, they argued, a simple error in judgment. She executed 187 separate fraudulent wire transfers across a span of 10 years. Gutfar was immediately remanded into custody, but a prison term could never reverse the wreckage she left in her wake. The Rio Rico Fire District calculates its losses at approximately $1.6 million over that decade of theft funds that should have purchased the brush trucks so critical during wildland fire season. In all, more than 15 different agencies, including school districts, fire departments, and the county government itself, were deprived of funds ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars each. A local woman, Bonnie Titer, addressed the court at the sentencing, stating that children in Santa Cruz County playing outside in the harsh sun because the money Gutfar siphoned away was never used to repair school facilities. Another resident, Wendy Isles, voiced a deeper concern, predicting that the poison of mistrust will linger for a very long time. The community is demanding transparency. The community is demanding accountability. A court-appointed receiver is now liquidating her assets, ranches, vehicles, livestock, luxury apparel in an attempt to reclaim what was lost. The projected recovery is somewhere between $10 and $13 million. That figure represents, at best, about 1/3 of the total amount stolen. In the fallout from the scandal, 2 county supervisors were removed from office by voters. The county has since filed a lawsuit against the Arizona Auditor General, alleging the state agency failed to identify the massive fraud despite a decade of what was supposed to be diligent oversight. That legal conflict is still ongoing, which brings us to the most unsettling question of all. How did a decade of systemic theft go completely unnoticed? Even her own defense attorney conceded that she took minimal steps to conceal her activities. A 2-step approval protocol, designed specifically to prevent this, was in place. She simply bypassed it by stealing a coworker's security credentials. The Arizona Auditor General was meant to be the ultimate backstop. The fraud was never detected. For 10 years, her colleagues put their faith in her. The electorate returned her to office. The entire system trusted her. And this story isn't just about Elizabeth Gutfar, It's about every small county across America where a single elected official wields immense, unchecked authority over public money. One has to wonder, how many others just like her are out there, right now, bleeding their own communities dry? $38.7 million, 187 wire transfers, 20 vehicles. One county treasurer, a 10-year campaign of theft that hollowed out a community, its schools, its fire departments, and its faith in government. Elizabeth Gutfar is now serving a 10-year sentence in federal prison. The county she betrayed is still grappling with the financial and psychological aftermath. If you believe this kind of corruption is confined to the halls of Washington, it's time to reconsider. Sometimes, the most devastating betrayals come from those in the smallest of offices. Subscribe for more investigations into the people who shatter public trust. The search for justice is relentless. For 10 agonizing years, the hard-working people of Santa Cruz County placed their unwavering faith in their elected treasurer, and for 10 years, they were robbed blind. Nearly $40 million vanished not into thin air, but into luxury ranches, designer clothes, and private empire building. Meanwhile, the real-world consequences were devastating. Children were left to learn in crumbling schools, and brave firefighters rushed into blazing wildfires with dangerously outdated equipment. The true cost of this betrayal isn't just a number on a financial ledger. It's the stolen safety and potential of an entire community. This tragedy sounds a glaring siren for every small town across America. We are conditioned to believe that deep-rooted corruption only thrives in the towering skyscrapers of Wall Street or the marble corridors of Washington. But the most shattering betrayals often happen right down the street, executed by the very neighbors we elect to protect us. The lesson is urgent. Trust, but verify. Civic duty does not end at the ballot box. We must fiercely demand transparency, insist on rigorous, unbreakable oversight, and relentlessly ask the hard questions about our tax dollars. Accountability is our only shield. When we look the other way, the most vulnerable among us pay the highest price. Let this be our wake-up call. Our communities are only as safe as the systems we refuse to ignore.